The first red flag wasn't the message itself. It was the envelope. Cream-colored, stiff, and embossed with my name spelled wrong. Meredith with 2 R's. I stared at it across the polished HR conference table like it might bite. Cheryl from HR, whose entire personality was scented candles and live, laugh, love mugs, slid it over like she was handing me a parking citation. "Due to internal realignment, your position has been deemed redundant," she said, rehearsed and robotic. 12 years. That's how long I'd given Brexton Tech. A company that built compliance software and ran their own HR like a bad improv skit. Cheryl added, "But hey, you've had a good run. 12 years is, wow, a long time." Then came the line. The one they all practice but don't realize cuts like piano wire. "You are replaceable." I didn't cry, didn't flinch. I smiled in that pleasant Midwest church lady way, the kind you use at funerals when you're already planning a lawsuit in your head. I walked back to my desk. My corner office. Earned, not gifted. 10 years of biting my tongue, of rewriting other people's messes into legal gold. I knelt beside the file cabinet and pulled out the box I always pretended was just in case. But a part of me, a quiet, coiled part, had known this day would come. Inside was a chipped mug that said, "Trust but verify," a crusty tube of lip balm, and one folder, labeled in Sharpie, "Hold for legal." That folder was my insurance policy, my quiet scream. Inside, doctored budget reports, flagged vendor transactions, and a note from the former CFO that literally said, "We'll bury this, don't worry." I'd held onto it for years, not because I wanted revenge, but because I believed in consequences. Eventually, I packed my box slowly. A few coworkers watched from the corners of their monitors. One of them, Jenna, mouthed, "I'm so sorry," like I'd just been diagnosed with something terminal. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't log off. I dropped my security badge onto my desk and walked out the front door like a ghost who just remembered they were never really alive in the first place. 2 days later, I was in sweatpants, scraping dried pasta off a Pyrex dish, when a message popped up on LinkedIn. From Alan Maddox. Title: Senior Oversight Analyst, Office of Federal Regulatory Affairs. He and I had shared a lukewarm coffee once at a conference in D.C. He wore a bolo tie and ate chicken salad with chopsticks. I remembered thinking, this man knows things other people don't. His message said, "Lunch next week? Something I'd like to run past you." Most people would have assumed it was just a friendly reconnect. But when someone from federal oversight who knows the difference between an ethics breach and a felony invites you to lunch, you go. And I did. I wore black. Took the train like I still belonged among the bustle. We met at a place called Haven and Grain, where the menus didn't have prices and the waiters didn't speak unless spoken to. Alan ordered duck tartare. I got a sparkling water and a grilled kale Caesar, dressing on the side. You don't reveal your cards over appetizers. He cut into the duck like it owed him money and said, "Heard Brexton Tech is restructuring. Shame." Mm-hmm. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. "We could use someone like you. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried." I didn't blink, didn't smile. I just reached for my water, took a long sip, and said, "Tell me more." Alan didn't need a resume. He already knew my file, knew the audits I'd salvaged, the ethics violations I'd flagged that somehow disappeared in committee, the way I rewrote entire Q4 summaries to keep the feds from sniffing too close. He knew I wasn't just good at compliance. I was compliance. He swirled his drink, whiskey, neat, like a man holding a secret. "There's an opening in internal audit," he said. "Real oversight, real teeth. You'd be reading companies like Brexton Tech, the Riot Act, one ledger at a time." I smiled, finally, bitter and dry. "So, I get to be the ghost that comes back with a badge? Alan grinned. Only if you bring your own pen. I told him I'd think about it, but we both knew the answer was already yes. Still, I spent that night pacing my apartment in socks and a sweatshirt that said, World's Okayest Employee. My cat, Orwell, stared at me from the windowsill, his tail twitching like a lie detector. I opened that old folder again. Hold for legal. I studied the fake vendor invoices, the audit log marked Do Not Review, the unsigned contractor memo with no timestamp. I remembered every time I'd been told I was too by the book, or not a team player, for pointing out things that could have tanked the company twice over. That night, I didn't feel disposable. I felt dangerous. The application for the Office of Federal Regulatory Affairs wasn't hard. Bureaucracy rarely is. The trick is knowing how to speak its language. I didn't lie. I just selected the most useful truths. At the end, it asked, Do you have any prior knowledge or relationships with entities you may regulate? I paused, hovered, then typed, Yes, Brexton Tech Systems, former senior compliance analyst, 12 years. I know where the bodies are buried, and I can read a balance sheet like it's a crime scene. 2 weeks passed. In the meantime, I took up running, badly. It made me feel like I was moving, like I was outrunning the ghost of who I used to be. I read whistleblower statutes for fun, tracked old government cases like bedtime stories. Then one Tuesday, while stirring instant coffee that tasted like drywall and bad decisions, I got the email. Welcome to OFRA. Orientation begins Monday. No balloons, no press release, just power. And it was quiet power, the best kind. Training felt like being waterboarded with acronyms. FAB alignment, SAR thresholds, the red flags of subcontractor subterfuge. By Wednesday, I had a headache shaped like a compliance flowchart, but under the boredom was something else. Access. I wasn't just in compliance anymore. I was compliance. My badge unlocked more than doors. It unlocked records, audit trails, internal financials, procurement histories. Everything that used to be redacted was now just open. Like a priest's confessional. Except I had a grudge and a government seal. And one afternoon, purely out of curiosity, or so I told myself, I pulled up Brexton Tech's filings. Not for a case, not for work, just to look. At first glance, clean, too clean, like someone had bleached the books. But I noticed a tiny ripple in Q2. Consulting services were up 41%, but the vendor hadn't changed. What had changed was the expense code. Same amount, same date. New label. Strategic forecasting. That's like calling your divorce lawyer a motivational speaker because they wear a tie. To most eyes, nothing. To mine, it stank. It was a classic shuffle. Reclassify the payment, hide the paper trail, pray no one notices the bulge in the carpet. I flagged the entry, dropped a note into the internal file, and walked away. Not because I was ready to move, because I was ready to cut. The match that lit the fuse came during a smoke break behind the building. Alan was leaning against the side of the concrete loading dock, flicking his lighter like it owed him money. Most companies don't get caught because they're clever, he said between drags. They get caught because they think no one's looking. Then he looked at me, hard. Now someone was. That night, I didn't sleep. I cracked open my personal backup drive, the one I'd mirrored from my Brexton Tech laptop before leaving. Technically murky, but they never made me sign an NDA, and that folder was my insurance, not a secret. I cross-referenced that consulting code change with a few old emails I'd archived. One stood out, from COO Samuel C. Reinhardt subject. Let's reclassify this. Attachment. Q2 on adjustments, final, 2.xlsx. There it was. No body text. Just an edit trail so sloppy it might as well have said, "I did this crime." They hadn't just fired me. They'd assumed I left empty-handed. But my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. I found out who replaced me while microwaving leftover chili in the Ofra break room. Someone had left an issue of Compliance Chronicle on the table. There it was, in the notable new hires section, Tanner Gresham, 23, new director of compliance at Brexton Tech Systems. Tanner, as in the CEO's nephew, as in the intern who once asked me if reporting bribes was mandatory, as in the kid who showed me a bottle of Glenlivet labeled $49.99 and said, "See, under the gift threshold." His LinkedIn summary read, "Passionate about scalable governance, agile ethics, and corporate synergy," which I'm pretty sure was generated by a chatbot after watching too many TED Talks. No certifications, no CPA, no CFE, no CIPP. Just a headshot that looked like he sold protein powder on Instagram and a quote from Elon Musk under it. I sat there with a plastic spoon hovering midair, chili forgotten, rage microwaving faster than lunch. They didn't just replace me. They replaced me with this. Later that week, after finishing a required training on whistleblower protection, I gave in to a temptation I'd been avoiding. I searched Brexton Tech in the complaint archive. And there it was. A whistleblower entry filed 8 weeks prior, from someone in my old department. Subject line, suspected offshore transfers plus vendor record deletion, filed directly to me. 2M. Dreyfus. From. Redacted. The sender's voice was unmistakable, quiet, sharp, and precise. Lauren Ortega. She used to bake lemon muffins for Friday stand-ups and had a color-coded folder system that could shame the Library of Congress. The complaint included a 2-page signed statement, heavily redacted, but the key points were bolded. Unusual vendor payments to unidentified foreign accounts. Instruction from upper management to clean out old logs. Pressure to retroactively justify expenditures under forecasting. I read it 3 times. Then I walked, calmly, deliberately, to the audit desk. Pulled out Form 312F, Formal Audit Request. Target, Brexton Tech Systems. Concerns, vendor reclassification, whistleblower suppression, potential fraud, and violations of the Ethical Reform Accountability Act. 24 hours later, I received a single-word reply from upstairs. Proceed. The next morning, Alan slid the authorization folder onto my desk. He didn't say a word, just nodded, like a priest handing over the relic that might burn a church down. And just like that, the gears began to move. Not around their throats yet, but around their lies. Tanner Gresham was about to learn that scalable ethics meant nothing when your ledger read like a confession, but I wasn't kicking in the doors. Not yet. This wasn't a revenge sprint, it was a methodical autopsy, one spreadsheet cell at a time. The first move? Whisper to the ghosts. No official emails, no letters on agency letterhead, just quiet texts, a few encrypted signal pings, and one accidental coffee shop bump-in with a former procurement manager now selling artisanal donuts at a co-op like his MBA never happened. The first to talk was Jason Lott, former budget analyst. He met me in a half-empty parking lot behind a Target, like we were swapping state secrets. He didn't even roll the window all the way down. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, his eyes scanning the lot like it owed him an alibi. "But that new kid Tanner, he's got no clue what he's doing. They only gave him read-only access." "Who's making changes then?" I asked. He hesitated. "The junior team. Their instructions were literal. Make it align. Not make it right. Just line it up." I asked, "Are they documenting anything?" Jason scoffed. "Documenting? Half the entries in Q3 are screenshots. Pasted. Don't even ask about vendor 67892. Nobody knows who they are. They invoice monthly. They get paid. I thanked him. He peeled out of the lot like I was radioactive. Next was Danielle Moss, the former contracts coordinator. Sharp, allergic to nonsense, and carried a taser on her keychain. She agreed to coffee, but brought her cousin, who happened to be a lawyer, and made us sit near the fountain in case there were hidden mics. I told her I wasn't recording. She said, "I didn't say you were." Still, she confirmed something I'd long suspected. "After you left," she said, stirring her tea with surgical precision, "they reclassified 3 major vendor payments. Board approved?" She shook her head. 2 of them were signed off by Tanner, but I'm 90% sure he didn't read a word. I saw him copy-paste his e-signature from an old email. Then came Elias Monroe, a soft-spoken analyst I hadn't heard from since 2022. He didn't call, didn't text, just mailed me a manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a USB stick, wrapped in bubble wrap, with a sticky note. Just in case they ever try to blame me. I didn't plug it in at home. I used a burner laptop at the office. What was on it? Backups of internal reports from the past 2 years. Some labeled V4 Final, others V4 Final, board copy. Dozens of line item differences between versions. Some vendor codes removed entirely, some approvals forged. The margin notes were worse. Clean this up before external eyes. Don't loop in Tanner. Board only sees this version. I didn't shake. Not anymore. Instead, I created a folder on my encrypted drive. Case file, Brexton Tech. Every file was a nail. Every forged signature, a hammer. Every time-stamped edit, another turn of the screw. By midnight, I had a 40-page preliminary audit brief. It read like a sermon of sin. They had built a temple of lies on pivot tables and pivoted one too many times. Their arrogance wasn't just sloppy, it was traceable. They never expected someone like me to come back through the front door with a badge and subpoena power. And then, the invitation arrived. Ivory cardstock, gold embossed edges. The Brexton Tech Foundation cordially invites you to our annual gala for STEM literacy. It screamed tax write-off and social theater. I nearly tossed it until I saw the host listed at the bottom. EEO. Langston Keller. I RSVP'd, yes. Not for the shrimp cocktail, not for the open bar, but because the invite came to my new title at Ofra. It was a signal, a warning shot. I wasn't watching from across the street anymore. I was inside the building, and I had brought the storm with me. I wore the same black dress I'd once reserved for weddings that ended in regret. Paired it with calm lipstick, low heels, and the kind of confidence you only earn after being buried and clawing your way back up through red tape. The gala was hosted at the Fairview Cultural Center. Marble floors, string quartet, and an open bar serving wine that tasted like bottled apologies. The donor wall shimmered with gold plaques for names I'd only ever seen on falsified 1099s. They seated me at table 9, assigned alphabetically. Across the pristine white linen sat Celeste Keller, Langston's wife. Her energy was high-end real estate meets Pilates instructor with a trust fund, the kind of woman who could identify your salary bracket by your watch band. "I'm Celeste," she said, extending a hand with a flawless manicure. "And you are?" "Meredith Dreyfus, Office of Federal Regulatory Affairs." Something behind her eyes flickered, like a faulty chandelier light. "Oh," she said, overpronounced. "Regulatory. How interesting." We chatted. Wine, weather, her labradoodle's anxiety meds. It was almost pleasant. Until dessert. She leaned in with that casual, too curious tilt that rich women use to mask a landmine of gossip. "My husband's been so stressed lately," she murmured, swirling her creme brulee with a golden spoon. "Keeps talking about some surprise review. Snaps at the gardener. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I smiled like a blade being pulled from silk. Probably nothing, I said lightly. Sometimes leadership gets jittery about audits that haven't even been scheduled. She laughed, too loud, too forced. Oh, I know. I told him, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. I paused mid-fork. I've always found, I said slowly, that the people who say that tend to have the most to hide. She blinked, twice, then reached for her wine like it was oxygen. I didn't stay for the closing speech, but I lingered near the exit long enough to see Langston Keller step out of the ballroom, phone pressed to his ear, pale and sweating, like a man being followed by something only he could see. He never even saw me, which made it perfect. The next morning, it started, not with fireworks, just the subtle creak of a foundation shifting. At 9:43 a.m., Langston's assistant submitted a request to the agency for an updated audit calendar. At 10:07, I had 2 missed calls from an old Brexton Tech landline. By noon, I got an email. Subject, just checking in, from Brexton Tech HR team. Body, hi Meredith, we just wanted to reach out and say how thrilled we are to see you thriving in your exciting new role. What a small world, right? Let us know if there's anything you need from us. Warmly, the Brexton Tech HR team. No contact name, no signature. Just corporate panic in business casual tone. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, I got a voicemail from Thomas Haverford, former CFO, amateur golfer, and professional denier of wrongdoing. Hey, Meredith! His voice had that upbeat panic of a man trying to sell a timeshare during a hurricane. So funny. Saw your name on a thing. What a coincidence, huh? We should talk. Clear the air. You know I always respected you. Deeply. He sounded like someone offering to repaint the gallows. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the preliminary audit packet. 24 pages of procedural requests. Dry. Precise. Nuclear. Then I added 3 more. Complete payment history for vendor accounts 67890 through 67900. Internal audit logs and IT access from Q2 and Q3. List of any reclassified expenses over $5,000 in the last fiscal year. I hit send. 2. Brexton Tech Audit Liaison. CC, CEO. BCC, legal. No greeting. No emojis. Just the digital equivalent of a black envelope. 6 minutes later, a reply. Received. Timeline confirmation forthcoming. Translation. We're sweating in designer suits and calling it transparency. I poured myself a glass of Merlot that night and watched the city flicker below my balcony. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was driving it. Brexton Tech had always seen me as a cog. Silent, replaceable, compliant. But now? Now I was the lead auditor with a badge, a memory like a steel trap, and a folder full of sins. And they'd replaced me with a LinkedIn intern who thought due diligence was a protein shake. The next morning, I met Nathan Dorrance, my former team lead, at a grocery store parking lot behind a shuttered Kroger. Lot C. The kind of place where career secrets go to rot. He was already leaning against the hood of his car, rumpled, twitchy, and reeking of nervous sweat. You came, he said. I'm here, I replied flatly. He glanced around, then opened his trunk. For a split second, I braced for something terrible, evidence, a bribe, or a last-ditch plea. Instead, he pulled out a thick manila envelope. This, he muttered, might smooth things out. Smooth? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean bribe. He flinched. It's not a bribe. It's a goodwill gesture. I didn't take it. He stepped closer, desperate now. Meredith, come on. You know what happens if this goes public? The board, the layoffs? You think Tanner takes the fall? No. It's people like us. The ones who knew. I tilted my head. You mean the ones who looked away while the books got cooked and the whistleblowers got buried? He swallowed. Hard. I'm trying to help you, he said, his voice cracking. You don't have to be the one who pulls the trigger. I leaned in slightly. But Nathan, I'm not pulling anything. I'm just pointing out the gun you all loaded. I turned and walked away, leaving the envelope on the asphalt like a broken prayer. Back home, I opened the final draft of the audit report. 7 red flags, 3 probable violations of federal ethics statutes, over a dozen manipulated entries. 1 email chain where Tanner literally asked, "Can't we just delete the flagged ones? Who's even checking?" I highlighted everything, labeled timelines with brutal clarity, left no wiggle room, no room for doubt. Every number was backed by a receipt, every oops marked with an edit history and a signature trail. The elevator cable was cut. All that was left was gravity. At 8:59 a.m. the following Monday, I walked through Brexton Tech's revolving doors, not as a staff member, but as the federal oversight agent sent to dissect them. Behind me were 2 junior auditors in clean-pressed blazers, carrying laptops like scalpels. They didn't know the full backstory. They didn't need to. They just had to follow my lead. The receptionist blinked at my badge like it was a ghost. You're here for the review? Audit, I corrected, showing the AFRA seal. Regulatory. That word hung in the air like a guillotine. 3 seconds later, Langston Keller emerged. No tie, pale, smile strained. Meredith, wow, look at you. New role, huh? He extended a hand. We're excited to work with you on this. Quick thing, shouldn't take too long, right? I didn't shake his hand. I looked him in the eye, steady as stone. That depends, I said, on what we find. Behind him, HR scrambled like a middle school theater troupe backstage before opening night. Clipboards, cold coffee, trembling voices. Karen, the same woman who once told me, "You're replaceable," stammered something about transparency and support. Her voice cracked on the word streamlining. I said nothing, just smiled. They ushered us to a conference room hastily prepped with thawing pastries and lukewarm water bottles. Someone had already turned on the projector, desperately trying to hide the rot behind a digital slideshow. Too late. I sat at the head of the table, opened my binder, flipped to page 3. Let's begin, I said, locking eyes with Langston. Starting with vendor account 67892. As of Q3, they billed $298,000, and no one can explain what service they provide. Silence. HR's pen fell to the floor. My junior auditor began typing, keys clicking like a courtroom stenographer at a firing squad. Page after page, I pressed forward. Every inconsistency lined up like dominoes on the edge of collapse. And this was only day 1. I closed my binder and stood. Calm. Clinical. For the rest of today, we'll be reviewing internal audits, subcontractor documentation, and accounts payable records. I trust the files I requested last week have been properly prepared? No one spoke. I turned to my junior auditors. Let's set up. As they moved, plugging in laptops and preparing forensic logs, I glanced around the room. Karen looked like she'd just watched her own career obituary scroll across the screen. Langston slumped in his seat, sweating through his tailored shirt, his mouth slightly open, like he was still trying to form a charm offensive that wouldn't come. I walked out of the conference room without another word, the door clicking shut behind me like a final sentence being handed down. Brexton Tech wasn't on fire. Yet. But the smoke had entered the vents, and I had a flamethrower in my bag. The news broke 3 days later. Not from me. I'm not that sloppy. But someone had whispered to someone else who was tired of pretending their bonus wasn't blood money. Or maybe it was Tanner, fumbling through something he didn't understand, finally realizing the house he inherited was wired to explode. Either way, the moment came. The leak hit. An internal memo flagged for escalation, screenshots of vendor shell companies tied to board members' family trusts, annotated reports showing data manipulation before quarterly calls. It made the rounds on internal Slack threads first, then industry forums, then LinkedIn. By 9:17 a.m., my inbox lit up. Langston's assistant sent a panic-drenched email asking for clarification. At 10:02 a.m., Brexton Tech's internal counsel issued a statement of ongoing cooperation to OFARA. At 11:30, HR emailed me again. Subject: touching base. I didn't open it. I was already in the middle of drafting the next phase of the audit, a full forensic breakdown of vendor flow-through accounts. I requested access to archived chat logs, VPN usage history, any use of personal devices for financial record approval. By 3 p.m., I received 2 voicemails from board members pretending to be just checking in, and 1 frantic text from Nathan. Whatever they told you, I swear I didn't sign anything. Please don't loop me in. I didn't respond. This was no longer about them. It was about all the people like me, the ones labeled replaceable and difficult, because we didn't ignore wrongdoing. It was about the interns used as scapegoats, the analysts told to make it align, the quiet compliance staff with file folders labeled hold for legal. 6 weeks later, the findings were finalized. The report was 92 pages long. Appendices included digital footprints, vendor crosswalks, shell entity tracing, and internal correspondence marked confidential that had never been turned over to the board. Key findings: willful manipulation of vendor classifications, suppression of whistleblower complaints, retroactive falsification of Q2 budget summaries, failure to disclose offshore expenditures, gross negligence under the Ethics Reform Accountability Act, recommendations, immediate federal penalties, referral to the Department of Justice, board-level resignations, and 1 final line. Lead auditor, Meredith Dreyfus, OFRA. Status: case closed. Oversight maintained. The aftermath? Predictable. Langston Keller announced his resignation to pursue philanthropic initiatives. Tanner Gresham disappeared from LinkedIn. Karen from HR updated her bio to career transitioning. Brexton Tech's stock dropped 17% in 2 days. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the walk back. 6 months after it all started, I returned to that same parking garage behind Kroger. Same car, same lot. Except this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was leaving something behind. The last manila envelope, unmarked. Inside, a single sticky note, the one the CFO once scribbled. Let's just make this disappear. And beneath it, a printed screenshot of a reclassification entry from Q2 with my final audit comment. This did not disappear. It escalated. I placed it on the dashboard of my old manager's car. No return address, just a reminder. You see, they were right about one thing. I was replaceable. But what they didn't know was this. So were they. And I had the clipboard.